Just a nurse, my stepsister said, loud enough for everyone to hear. At her own wedding. She didn't know the groom's father was about to stand up because of me. Weddings are supposed to bring out the best in people. Smiles, pride, family pretending, at least for a day, that everything is fine. Ours was performance, perfect photos, carefully managed conversations. And underneath it all, tension. My stepsister had always cared about appearances, titles, status, what people could see, and what they could assume. So when she introduced me to her new in-laws, I already knew how it would go. "This is my stepsister," she said, smiling brightly. Then, after a slight pause, "She's just a nurse." Just. That word landed exactly how she intended. Light on the surface, heavy underneath. A few polite nods followed. Someone smiled awkwardly. Another person said, "Oh, that's nice." Nice, like it was small, temporary, something to politely acknowledge and move past. I didn't react, didn't correct her, didn't explain, because I'd learned something a long time ago. People hear what they expect to hear. And she needed them to see me that way. Smaller, simpler, less, so she could feel like more. I took a sip of water and stepped back slightly, letting her continue her introductions. Doctor, investor, consultant, each title said, louder than the last, each one carefully chosen, carefully emphasized, because to her, value had to be visible, and mine wasn't meant to be. The ceremony started soon after. Everything went exactly how she wanted. Perfect timing, perfect lighting, perfect attention. And for a while, it worked. Laughter filled the room. Glasses clinked. Speeches began. Stories about success, about achievement, about making it. I stayed quiet at my table, watching, listening, not bothered, just observing, because I knew something she didn't, something she hadn't thought about when she chose that word. Just. The reception moved on. Dinner was served. More conversations, more introductions. And then it shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. One of the older guests stood up from across the room. The groom's father. Until that moment, he'd been quiet, observing. Like me, he looked around briefly, then his eyes stopped, on me, and his expression changed. Recognition, clear, immediate. He started walking in my direction, slow, intentional. People noticed, because he wasn't supposed to be moving, not during this part, not without reason. My stepsister noticed too. Her smile faltered slightly, because this wasn't part of the plan. He stopped in front of me. Close Eno 3 ugh that the nearby tables went quiet. And then he said something no one there was expecting. "You," he said, his voice steady. "You're the one who saved my life." And just like that, the room changed. The words didn't just land. They echoed across tables, through conversations, straight into silence. "You're the one who saved my life." For a second, no one moved. No one spoke, because the sentence didn't fit the narrative that had been carefully built all evening. My stepsister blinked. Once, twice, like she was trying to reset what she just heard. "I think you might be mistaken," she said quickly, stepping forward with a tight smile. He didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed on me. Steady, certain. "I don't make mistakes about things like that," he replied, calm, confident, the kind of confidence that doesn't need to be loud. I set my glass down slowly. "You were in the ER," I said. "It was late." 3 months ago, he added immediately. "Cardiac arrest." I nodded once, memory clicking into place. Because cases like that, you don't forget. Not the timing, not the pressure, not the outcome. "You coded twice," I said, "and you brought me back twice. he replied. The room shifted again, because now it wasn't vague. It wasn't exaggerated. It was real, specific, documented in a way no title could compete with. My stepsister let out a small, nervous laugh. Wow, that's amazing, she said, glancing around as if trying to regain control of the moment. But I'm sure there were doctors involved too. There were, he said, finally looking at her, but she didn't leave. That stopped her, completely. He turned back to me. You stayed, he continued. Most people would have stepped back after the first round. But you didn't. I didn't respond, because I hadn't done it for recognition, or stories, or moments like this. I did it because that's the job. That's the responsibility. That's what being a nurse actually means. But in that room, it meant something else now. Something visible. Something undeniable. I remember your voice, he added. You kept telling me to stay with you. A quiet murmur spread through the guests, because now they weren't just hearing about a job. They were hearing about a moment, a life, a line that almost ended and didn't. My stepsister shifted beside me, uncomfortable, out of place, because the word just had nowhere to go anymore. The groom, who had been silent until now, stepped closer. Dad, you never told me this, he said. His father gave a small smile. I didn't know I'd see her again, he replied. Then, after a brief pause, I didn't think I'd get the chance to thank her properly. And that's when the room changed again. Not in volume, but in weight. Because gratitude, real gratitude, carries something different. He extended his hand toward me. I shook it, firm, simple. Thank you, he said. 2 words, but heavier than everything that had been said all night, because they weren't about status, or titles, or appearances. They were about impact, about reality, about the difference between being seen and being understood. My stepsister tried to smile again, but it didn't reach her eyes this time, because the attention had shifted, not to her dress, not to her event, but to something she couldn't control, something she couldn't reduce or reframe. Around the room, people looked at me differently now, not politely, not dismissively, but with recognition, the kind she had been trying to manufacture for herself all evening, given freely, without effort, without performance, just truth. And for the first time that night, she had nothing to say, because there was no way to spin it, no way to shrink it, no way to turn just a nurse into something small again. Not after that, not anymore. And in that silence, the roles she had carefully arranged shifted completely. No one went back to their conversations the same way. They tried. Smiles returned. Music picked up again. But something had shifted, permanently. My stepsister stayed close to the groom after that, quieter than before. Careful, measured, like she was trying to rebuild something that had already cracked. I didn't stay much longer, not out of discomfort, but because there was nothing left to prove. As I picked up my bag, the groom's father approached me one last time. I meant what I said. He told me, "You gave me more time I didn't think I'd have." I nodded. "That's enough for me," I replied, because it was, always had been. I walked past the tables, past the guests who now looked at me differently, not because I changed, but because their understanding finally did. At the door, I paused briefly, not to look back at her, but to take in the moment. Then I stepped outside. Quiet air, no noise, no performance, just clarity, because titles fade, opinions shift, but impact, that stays. And no matter how small someone tries to make you sound, there's nothing just about saving a life.